Sorry, wardrobe malfunction start here. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started as it's 2:30. So my name is Jamie Forshee, and I am the Director of Instructional Technology at the Belvedere School District. And I'm going to be talking to you today about Xscape EDU, which is a teacher movement that's recently begun to get some traction in the central Pennsylvania area. So my hope today and my goal for presenting this afternoon is going to be twofold. One, if you are not familiar with R.E.A.L EDU and escape room usage in the classroom, then I'm going to talk a little bit about that and the value of using those kinds of resources in the classroom. And then the second part of that goal is going to be to talk to you about something, as I just mentioned, Xscape EDU, which you can see here on the slide, as well as an event that has stemmed from this movement called the Xscape Extravaganza. So with me today, I have some friends and colleagues. I have Sarah Brambley from R.E.A.L, who was instrumental in helping me launch the Xscape Extravaganza last year that was held at R.E.A.L. She also is going to be participating with her own kids this year. They're bringing a team to our competition. Like I said, I'll get more into that information in a little bit. I also have with me Renee Jamison, who was recently hired at Tyrone Area School District as a tech coach. And you are K-8, correct? K-8. And Renee, we were just talking, I've known Renee for a while, but we've really gotten to know each other over the past year because I did a similar session at P&C in Hershey last year. And so she jumped on the bandwagon and brought students to our event last year and is now working with 3 teams this year to bring to that event. And then last but not least is Kermit 4. Kermit, give everybody a wave over there. So Kermit is a former student of mine. I worked with him in Tech Club since he was in 5th grade, and he is one of those once-in-a-career type kids that actually helped me launch a lot of the stuff that you are going to see here today. So we're going to get started. That's a splash screen. That just talks a little bit about what the initiative is that I will be explaining to you today. But before I get into that, I thought that it would be really important for me to give you a little bit of the backstory so that you understand how the journey got us from point A to point B instead of just jumping right into this and then you're like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown, I don't think I can do this, and I scare you away. So I want to talk about how we started very small and then evolved into something that's a little bit more complicated and complex. And not complicated in the sense that you can't do it, but students have learned to create puzzles and clues and riddles and those kinds of things that you would use in an escape room or in a breakout activity. They're doing more complex activities because they're much more experienced in creating these kinds of games and activities for their peers. So that's the key here, that we're working with students and they're creating games and activities for their peers. So this is kind of how all of this evolved. I was thinking earlier today, like how long have I really been doing breakout activities or escape room activities with students? And I recall going back to the year 2016 when I was coming to P&C, and I had talked to a few of my friends that live nearby, and they said, hey, let's get together, and while you're here, let's do an escape room. And I was like, an escape room? I have no idea what that is. And my one friend said, you'll love it, because you have that personality that likes to solve things, and you teacher people, you like these kinds of things. So I went with them. They are not teacher people, they are medical personnel. So we went to this escape room in Hershey, and I loved it. And I have to tell you, and I'm sure that many of you can relate, when I was in the room, the entire hour that we were in there, I kept thinking to myself, you could do this in a classroom. You could do this with kids. This is awesome. Puzzles, riddles, locks. Kids would just love this. They would be totally engaged if you could relate this to content. So my wheels started turning, and we went to dinner, and I have to admit, like, I was barely paying attention to what was going on at dinner, because in my mind I'm thinking, how can I take this back to my district, share this with teachers, share it with my tech club students, and how could we make this happen? So lo and behold, I'm sitting at the fireplace in the Hershey Lodge. If any of you have ever been there, you know that's like the meeting place in the evenings for people that participate in the conference. So I'm sitting at the fireplace going through my agenda, you know, like all 947 pages, trying to figure out where you're going. And I noticed that there was a theme that was going on, and it was breakout this, escape the classroom that, you know, all these different sessions about breakout games. And I literally, you know, I've been in ed tech for, you know, close to 20 years, and I never even heard of the concept. So I went to just about every single breakout session that Pete and C hosted that year, and I was on fire with that concept and just knew that I loved it, knew that it had a place in education, and came back on a Wednesday from Pete and C and turned around a digital breakout training by Friday because we had an in-service, and then it just kind of went from there. So before I get into, like I said earlier, some more complicated things or complex things that we're doing with students, I wanted to make sure that you knew that we didn't start like that. So what I did when I got back to my district and worked with teachers, we just got a subscription to the Breakout EDU platform. How many of you are familiar with that? Okay, so some of you are. How many of you are familiar with Teachers Pay Teachers? Okay, that is a great resource to find pre-made games. And how many of you have ever been in an escape room? Okay, so I'm dealing with people that are pretty familiar with that information. Okay, cool. So we started out basically, we didn't have at the time a lot of devices, and so we started just using computer labs to do digital breakouts. I was downloading games from, like I said, the Breakout EDU site, and also Teachers Pay Teachers. I would look for, you know, games on there that were related to some of the curricular topics that the teachers were using in the classroom. And so we would download that information, and I would work with my tech club students, and we would develop these games for teachers, take them to their classrooms, drop them off, say, so, you know, we would take a few pictures here and there, and we would kind of just leave it at that. And I had a student that said to me when we were building these games, hey, why are we paying for these games, and why are you downloading these items when, if Mrs. Coleman wants a tornado breakout game, why aren't we just making a game for her? I thought, that's a really good idea, why didn't I think of that? And so we went to Mrs. Coleman's room, and so, well, actually I'm gonna back up here for a minute. Go ahead, Sarah. So it's actually in the next picture, but we went to Mrs. Coleman's room, and I had 3 of my students at the time that were 10th graders, and we connected with 3 of her gifted students, and so the 6 of these students worked together on creating this really super cool breakout game. And then from there, it just kind of took off, and we then had requests from teachers, and then there were games that students just said, hey, let's make a game for our media center. Hey, let's make a game for this, let's make a game for that. And did it turn out to be really super cool? Yes. Is it time consuming? Yes. But our teachers loved it because they could have a customized game built for their students, for their content, you know, specifically what they wanted students to learn and master in their room. So we built games that introduced concepts. We built games for like a mid-chapter or mid-unit review. We also built games for assessments at the end of a unit, or for a culminating activity where students could just, you know, use the knowledge that they learned from whatever chapter or unit to have a little bit of fun and reinforce those skills. So as you can see, we had an entire list of different games that we created with students. So from there, that same year, that summer, I went to the Pittsburgh Fab Lab. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but while at that conference in Elizabeth Forward School District, they had a session on escape rooms, and I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, all the stars are lining up and I'm supposed to be doing these things. So I went to that session, and the teachers that were hosting that session actually built an escape room in an old office in their middle school. And so we went through that room with a group, and then afterwards we debriefed and we talked about, once again, the value of escape rooms and how you could go about building these kinds of things in your own district. And so before the session was even over, I left it and called the middle school principal and said, can I have the old ISS room? And he was like, okay, for what? And I said, I want to build an escape room. And he's like, I don't know what that is, but yeah, sure. So the following week, I went back and gutted this escape room with students like Kermit, and I had a few other helpers at that time, and we started to work on getting this escape room built. At the same time, so some of the stuff occurred kind of simultaneously. I ended up hooking up with a outfit out of California called R.E.A.L Scholars, and they're here in several sessions, and if you're interested in learning more about entrepreneurial education and starting a business with students, you really want to check that out. So in addition to students saying, hey, let's build an escape room, and me going to Elizabeth Forward, connecting with EdCorps, I wrote a grant, and they planted or kind of seeded us for $1,000, and then I also got a grant from our foundation for another $1,000. So we had $2,000, and we decided that we were going to build this escape room. So the first thing that we did, because some of the kids had never been to an escape room, they had played breakout games with me and were part of developing games for teachers, but they had never actually been in a room themselves. So we went on a field trip to State College, and we went in this escape room, and we learned from the game masters and from the individuals that owned the business what it took to build an escape room business, and we got some clues on how to make that happen. Kermit spent a lot of time with their game developers and their owners, learning about the technical aspects of that. And so when we ended up building our room, which you'll see here coming up, we started to collect supplies. This one's hilarious because I don't know if you've ever shown students a rotary phone. They have no idea. Like when I got this and brought this into my office one day and said, hey, we need to think of a clue or a puzzle that would use this, and they were like, what is that? And so that's when you know that you're old, when you're starting to get things from the 70s, because that's the theme that we decided on, because I'm not even really sure where that came from, the 70s. I think just one of the students said, we like 70s music and the Steve Miller Band, so let's make a 70s room. And I thought, well, I'm kind of from that era, so that'll work. But they didn't even know what half this stuff is. And when you take elementary and middle school students in our room and they look at that, they're like, what is that? So it's really actually kind of funny. So we have a phone, and then we started to collect albums, and some of them never saw a vinyl album before, so that was pretty funny. Light Bright is a clue that we have in there, and once again, some of them knew, some of them did not have a clue, and some of them still do not. So when you watch in our room what's going on, it's really actually pretty funny, because kids will pick things up and say, what's this? So it's comical. We started collecting pictures, including my 6th grade class picture, and you can hurry up and forward that one. Yeah, like which one's you? And so out of all of that, the Hidden Exit was born, and that's the name of our company that we started with EdCorps, and from there, our room then was called Escape the 70s. And so essentially, you're locked in this room for 1 hour, and you are solving clues that deal with reading, writing, math, that all, are kind of related to anything that would be in the 70s. So as you can see, there's not a lot of pictures, but you can see that it looks like somebody's my grandmother's apartment. So that was really cool. And we started using that room during the school day for students during study halls, activity period. We worked after school and allowed people like the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts. We've had birthday parties in there. We've had a graduation party in there, just all different kinds of things. So it was not only just open to our students, but it was open to the public as well. And so I'm only sharing that with you, not because this is an infomercial for me getting you to come to our business. It's part of the journey and how we landed where we are today. So this is still in operation. We're in our 3rd year. We're finding that we're using that less and less, because we have students that are creating their own games, and they're mobile in nature, and there's more excitement that has actually been generated about mobile games in my district anyway right now than actually for using the room. So we're kind of still doing a combination of each, but like I said, it's just part of our story. So this is a video, Sarah, so if you could just hit that. This is like a 1-minute video. I just wanted to give you an idea, because I want you to see what kids, were able to do as a result of this. So one of the reasons that I really enjoy showing that video is because it kind of highlights some of the props that are in that room. Like there was an owl that was kind of a wooden, you know, like a string art owl that was timely for that era. And then you saw kind of Kermit at a kind of a coin prop. What we were able to do since we started this is we've been incorporating other curricular areas into our projects. So we work pretty closely with both of our shop teachers. So if we have anything that needs to be built, we try to build it ourselves instead of buying it. So we work pretty closely with the shop. We have the home ec teacher involved in the projects that we do. If there's any kind of sewing or anything else that that we might need her to do, we work with the art teacher. So the art teacher did string art with our students, and we were able to come up with a clue that involved that. Kermit at that time was our main builder, and he built all of the wooden props that you saw that were highlighted in that video, and also he was the mastermind kind of behind wiring and retrofitting all of the electronics that we have in the room. So the room doesn't really look like it's kind of high tech, but there are components in there that are actually pretty high tech. One of the things that he built is we bought a little coin prop, and he built a case for that. And so in our room, we made it so that it was, I don't know if you've ever heard of linear games. Linear games mean that you go from puzzle A and get the answer, and then open up puzzle B, and then get the answer for puzzle B, open up puzzle C, etc. Or non-linear, which is that you may have some clues over here that a couple of your group members could solve while others are working on a different clue over here. Or you can have a scavenger hunt in which players are looking for something. So in our game, we have a combination of linear and non-linear puzzles, as well as a scavenger hunt. So kind of getting back to the coin prop, he built this coin prop, so students are collecting coins the entire time that they are in our room. Sometimes they can find the coins just like, say, in a pencil container, and sometimes they're rewarded when they open up a puzzle box with a coin. And the object is to find 24 coins. When you find those 24 coins, you load them into this coin prop, and that coin prop has a mag lock in it, and it opens a door, you get a key out, and then you open the door to the escape room. So that's kind of the premise behind that, and that's where that was, and that's why I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that to you, because there was a lot of building and thinking and collaborating and working across curricular levels and content areas to try to make this happen. And so from there, we just sort of kept that same concept going and found that those items were important when we were just building simple tabletop games for teachers. So we still wanted to make sure that we were doing all of those things. So this is a picture of the students that were high school students that worked with our elementary students on the tornado game. And then in the next picture, we built a Pete the Cat breakout box. So if you're an elementary teacher and you're familiar with the Pete the Cat book series, so we made this game that Pete lost his sunglasses and you had to find them. So they had to go through a series of clues with colors and numbers and sight words that were relevant to the book and to what the teachers were doing in the first grade classroom. So we built 5 of these boxes and we delivered them, and so we started doing these activities with first graders. And then our first grade teachers were telling our kindergarten teachers at lunch one day about what they were doing, and so they swapped these games, and we had kindergarten students doing them. And the reason that I'm sharing that with you is because I've heard a million times that kindergarten students and first grade students, that's too young, you can't do this kind of stuff with these kids. But you absolutely can do this stuff with that age level of kids. In fact, we used first graders and kindergarten students to take some of these tornado games and Pete the Cat games up to 4th grade, and the first graders and the kindergarten students were showing 3rd and 4th graders how to work, locks and how to decipher codes and puzzles and things like that. So there's really no age limit that this wouldn't work for, and there's really no content area that you could not build a game for, regardless of what you teach. One of the things that, another one of the things that kind of stemmed from doing this work is that we made a partnership with Penn State, Altoona, and one of the professors in the education department was in our district for a different reason, and we were showcasing some of our STEM and STEAM concepts that we have in our maker spaces, and we took them on a visit to our escape room. And so after that, we started hosting professional learning sessions for Penn State interns. And then the idea was that you would build a game with a group of your peers that were in your student teaching cohort, so that you could utilize that game when you went to your classroom. And so the other thing that kind of stemmed from that, so this is a picture of, no, that's okay. This is a picture of 3 interns that we had in our district that were part of that program, and they built this game that was based on endangered species, and their focus was on a turtle, and forgive me, I can't remember the exact name of the book. Some of you are like shaking your head, you probably know what that is. But they used this in a 2nd grade classroom. And that from all of these games that these students, these Penn State students made, we had kind of like a little mini expo in which they brought their games to our district, and then the students that were in my tech club, and then we asked for additional students to be part of that. We kind of had like a little miniature event in which our students played all of their games and gave them feedback and tried to help them with suggestions on what would make their games, better, or what didn't work, what was difficult to understand, what was maybe too easy. And so that has been working out really well too, and that's an example in the next picture. So that's our students playing some of their games. And so all of that kind of led to Kristen Dunn, who's with Real-World Scholars. She brought her family on a Saturday to our escape room, and I was sharing with her all of the activities that were going on that resulted from us building this escape room and becoming involved in this business. And so we got to talking, and she asked me, where did I think that this was all going? And I said that I would like to try to involve as many educators as possible into not only playing games with students, but giving students the opportunity to actually build games, because although there is a lot of learning involved when you just allow students to play games, I feel that you're really taking skill levels to the next level when you are allowing them to be the ones that develop a game. So if you've played a game, then you know that they can be really challenging, and there's a lot of problem solving involved, and critical thinking and thought processes that you need to use that are outside of the box. Like 2 + 2, yes, it's 4, but 4 might be an answer in an escape room or a breakout game, but you wouldn't necessarily have to add 2 + 2 to get to that 4. You might have to do a whole series of activities in order to arrive at the answer of 4, or whatever it may be. So I highly encourage, have encouraged teachers that if you really want to take that learning to the next level, that you should allow them to try to build games. Because have any of you in here ever built a game? So just a few of you. So those of you that have just had your hands up know that it takes learning, up a notch. It kicks it up to that next level, because you're really, really needing to think through what it is that you want students to be doing, or your peers or players in your game, to be doing in order to figure it out. I kind of liken it to an essay on directions. Like when you're writing, you ever ask students to write directions for something, and in their head it makes perfect sense to them, and you read it and you're like, if you were somebody from a different planet or from another country that wasn't really sure about how to do this, they would have no clue. And that's sort of like building an escape room game. You know the answer, so you think things are pretty easy, but will the next person really understand what you're trying to do? So that's why we encourage students to test out their puzzles and test out their games so it makes sense across the board for players before we launch the game. So getting back to like what Kristen asked me, where do you see all of this going? I thought, after talking with her that day, we should try to launch something and unite teachers that are interested in this concept, and try to get as many people on board in our area, and then if luck would have it that we could expand this into other areas, then we would like to do that. And so I came up with this idea called Xscape EDU, and focusing on students creating games for other students. And as you can see the flyer over there, it talks about the skill set the skill sets that are involved, and whether you call it the 4 C's or 21st century skills or essential skills, you're either all of those terms are basically involving students getting the essential skills that they need to be successful in the world and in the workplace, whatever that they're doing beyond, our four walls. I don't necessarily like to call these soft skills. I know that's a big buzzword, but I almost feel like when I've been talking to industry and business partners, they're like, what are you talking about soft skills? Does that mean they're not really that important? And so I've tried to get away from using the soft skills terminology because I think these skills are really, really important for students in this day and age. And so I refer to them as essential skills. And as you all know, as educators, these two items here, perseverance and passion, are really lacking a lot of times with our students, and grit. And so I really feel that by engaging with these games and building, designing, creating, playing, it really fosters these kinds of skills. And so what I'm going to do right now is to take a little bit of a break from me talking, and I'm actually going to have you get engaged with an activity. For those of you that have never done anything like this, I would like for you to do that. Plus it's after lunch. I think we kind of need to move around a little bit. And the other thing too that I wanted to do is, so I built this game. Can you all hear me back there? So I built this game with middle school students last year. So it's essentially a 2-puzzle game that I'm going to have you play. One, like I said, I want to try to get you up, moving around a little bit, and doing some of the things that I'm saying that occur when you work with students in this capacity. I want you to experience that for yourselves. And secondly, I want to show you that if you would like to start building your own games, they don't have to be elaborate games. Like I'm going to show you something that I'm currently building with students. It's a jail cell. It's an 8x8 jail cell. It's super cool, probably one of the best games I've ever been involved in building. I don't want to show you that and you leave here and think, there's no way I would ever want to do something like that. I didn't always build jail cells with students. I built these kinds of things with students, for students and for teachers, where it's just something pretty simple. I mean, it's an activity where you will have to think a little bit, but you're basically doing two things and then you're getting out. Essentially, this should be done in about 10 minutes. If not, we'll give a little bit more time. But I would like to, do this activity with you so that you can kind of experience what I'm saying. But before I do that, is there anything you would like to add that I may have missed so far? Not yet. Sarah?
No, not yet. Thanks.
Perfect. Anything about the hidden exit or building the escape room that you felt as a student? And Kermit is a sophomore at Cal U. He's in the tech ed department, so he's kind of going into this field, and he has told me more than once that he's taking my job when he graduates. And I'm fine with that because that means I'll be retired in 2 years. So would you like to add anything?
There's a lot of learning and hands-on stuff. From my perspective and being involved with it, there's just so much learning that's there, and it's behind the scenes where instead of sitting in a classroom telling students what they need to know, the students actually learn by themselves. There's more hands-on stuff.
And we built the room. Our goal was, we started it in June, worked a little bit throughout the summer, and we thought that we would have our room launched in October. And then we backed the date up to November, then December, and then finally we ended up launching it in April. And it wasn't due to lack of interest, lack of passion, lack of motivation. It wasn't any of those things. It was, that's how long it took us to actually put a room together and work with. We had 19 students at that time in his class that were working on that. That's how long it took us to work out all the bugs. And we had test drive after test drive, and they were nightmares, to be honest with you. And so, but you learn so much from failure. And when people would go into our room and things didn't work, we would be like, we have a microphone, we have audio. He wired that as well. As you can see, he's pretty much a guru. We just knew that we had to go back to the drawing board. So us going back to the drawing board delayed our opening for like several months. But when we opened it, we felt like that we had a much better game. So lots of learning, like Kermit said, taking place.
I would agree with that. So I am doing it with 2 third graders and a 5th grader, so very young students. But they do a lot. Our theme is the Oval Office, so they've done a lot of research on the presidents, and they're responsible for the learning, and they have learned a lot and have incorporated it into the Xscape room, and so it really is a lot of kid-centered learning, student-centered.
And R.E.A.L was a first grade teacher last year before she took the new job that she's in now. So she worked with first grade students and fourth grade students to build games. So it can be done.
And now it's 8th grade. And I think I was out of my first grade.
Yeah, God bless you, 8th grade, right? Who's our middle school people in here? Yeah, I was an 18-year, middle school teacher veteran, so, and I survived with all this gray hair. But so if you could just move, I only have 10 of these boxes, so if you could kind of move, or if you're not really interested in doing that, if you want to come and talk to one of us, because what we'll be doing then is getting into a little bit more about the showcase that we do as a result of this. Oh, great, thank you. Does anybody else need a box? I have one more.
Oh, that's it. Are you done? Just kidding. That's funny.
You had it for seconds. Yep.
No pressure. Well, good. You're looking at it the right direction. Thank you for volunteering. We'll jump right up. Where was it?
Yes, and it's usually like, I don't remember it is. It's quick.
share, but we don't have any money to do anything as a because we're in the black.
So that's kind of like a little search that overline lines. Right, exactly.
Hey guys, if I had more time with you, I would just have you continue coloring this in. I think you pretty much all figured out that you need to color in the numbers that you found in the paragraph. So it was like a little decoding activity. So the directions were like implied instead of specifically given to students. You color in those like 6 is 1, 4 is 1, 1 is 1, and then you complete the QR code. When you scan that, it takes you to a website. So what I'm going to do is Kermit and I and Renee will come around and we'll just let you scan this so that you can get to the next part of the activity.
Oh, yeah, sure. It is hard to see that. You're welcome. So if you scan and you're on a phone, it's like a concentration game. So if you have a bigger device, it might be easier on a bigger device, but you can't do it on a phone. Oh, sure.
We have no one over here.
So you guys are smart too. So we're smarties over here.
You started working with that 2016.
Yeah, so I think it took a little while to get a little traction.
I got it. So like how much time you how much time say like if it's one breakdown or one like classroom like that thing right there like how long
This one.
now you're the expert so like you probably still Right, so you're how many tools do you have in that?
I think we had 4. We had tested with they added 3 more. Now they're like making them. Yeah.
Did you use plasters.net to create that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, guys, there were some questions that I'm being asked, and so I'll just make sure that I'm answering them to the group in case you also have those same questions. So, but before I do that, give me a shout out if you can say what kinds of skill sets that students would have had to use in order to be successful at this kind of mini game. Like what kinds of things that they have to do in order to decode, you know, some of the stuff and get from point A to point B to point C, which was to open the lock and get the candy. Anybody want to shout out?
Reading.
Reading. Anyone else?
Maybe collaborative.
Collaboration, yep, awesome. Anything else? Critical thinking. I heard something. Did you say critical thinking also? Okay. I heard perseverance. Yeah, because some people are with this game are really frustrated because they continually try to access the QR code without realizing that it's not complete. And so it's just that mindset. Like, we see that QR code and we think we should have to scan it, and automatically takes us to wherever it should be. So it's, once again, kind of that out of the box thinking. But it was doing a matching game. You know, if you didn't know what year Breakout EDU was created, you had to do a Google search. So there were just some other kinds of skills that were kind of embedded into that activity that students have to use in order to be successful at that. So one of the questions up here was, how long did it take you to make that game that you just played? I have students that were experienced with that QR code activity, and I have students that are obviously experienced at building this game. So I would say that took us about 2 hours, and then me shopping for materials, ordering materials, putting everything together, laminating the little end card, you know, creating those kinds of things, probably total between 4 and 5 hours, you know, for something like that. Not straight, obviously, but over, you know, the course of like a week or two, we ended up putting that together. And then Sarah answered the question too. She is building a game with her kids and a couple of other students in her kids' school. And she's working on how many hours now to build your 30-minute game?
I think about 7.
Okay, about 7 hours. So the jail cell that I'll show you a picture of here in a minute, we probably have 10 hours in just building the jail cell. So fortunately, the parent volunteer that's helping us, he lives across the street from the school, so he comes home for his lunch hour, and we go over there and we do things with him. So it's actually been a really cool collaboration. So, no, that's fine, we're good. I just want to, yeah, if you could go back one. So I want to talk to you just a little bit before it's time. What time is it? It's what? Oh, okay, so we only have about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure I get to the real point was that you will hopefully use these games with your students, or these types of activities with your students. But the other portion of that, if you remember at the beginning, I said that I wanted to try to recruit as many people, teachers, educators, to become part of our little movement here as possible. And one of the ways that you could do that is to just, you know, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, learn what's happening, do these things with your students. You know, tag us in those things, send me information. You know, we would be happy to include you in that. And the other thing is, I don't know what your proximity is to the Altoona area, but we're having our 2nd annual Xscape extravaganza on March 20th. And so last year, what occurred is I talked the IU into letting me use their facility to host this crazy idea that I had, that we could create something like Odyssey of the Mind, or something similar to like robotics challenges or First Lego League, something like that, that students would come with their games pre-made, and then we would have kind of like a round robin where, you know, other groups of students from other schools could make their way around the room every 30 minutes. We did kind of like a round robin type activity, and the students that were there played 3 games. So the biggest complaint that we got from the activity was that it wasn't long enough. And so how many times have you ever heard a kid say that they wanted to stay at school longer? And so this year they actually suggested that we have an event on a school day on a Friday, and then have an open session for parents and the public on a Saturday. So I'm not really sure if the Saturday thing is going to happen yet. You know, we kind of have half and half responses, but you know, we have 20 teams this year in our activity, and they're from 6 different school districts in the IU8 region. And we'll, like I said, we'll be hosting that on Friday, March 20th. So if you would be interested in learning more about that, you're welcome to come. If you think you're brave enough and you could get permission from the powers that be at your school district, you would be certainly welcome to join us with a team. But if that doesn't work for you, the other thing that I will tell you is that one of the things that we've been doing in about the last year and a half is I've been taking groups of students to other districts and doing something similar to this with teachers and students, and the students actually run it. So they run the presentation, they run the breakout activities using games that they have created. In fact, we were just with R.E.A.L and her 8th grade students about 2 weeks ago. So my 8th grade students went down to visit with her 8th grade students and showed them their latest game that they made, which is super cool. I'm going to show that to you, and gave them suggestions and ideas and feedback and kind of some guidance on how it works to, you know, to make a game, and what are some best practices in terms of, you know, getting started and designing and brainstorming and all of those kinds of things. So this Planet game was one of the games that my 7th graders made last year, and this was one of the games that when we go to other schools, we kind of feature this game because it turned out to be something that was really super cool. It's kind of a digital breakout game and a physical breakout game in one. And just kind of a side note, I don't know how many of you have ever created or played digital breakout games with your students, and there are a lot of advantages to those because you don't need devices. You don't need physical boxes and physical locks, so you can just basically, if you have a device, you can access the game because they're usually, you know, device agnostic. But I have found that in our district, I stopped making digital games or even downloading digital games because, believe it or not, like our digital natives do not like digital breakout games as well as they like the physical breakout games. They love the hands-on, opening up the locks, you know, the whole physical touching of the locks and the shackles and things like that. So I'm not saying that I oppose, you know, the digital games, but from my vantage point in my district and what I'm trying to accomplish, we sort of weave some digital components into, you know, some of the games that we're building. You know, the kids use sensors. They find electronic locks. They look all over Amazon, and just about every day when I come back to my office, I have a sticky note that says, "Hey, can you get this for us?" And so if I have a good reason as to why, you know, I need to purchase that item for them to build a game, then I'll do it. And then once those items arrive, I give them the package and, you know, pretty much say have at it. I don't, you know, make audio files for them. I don't set up locks for them. I don't do any of that. I mean, I guide them certainly, but I am more like hands off in that department and let them just kind of do their own thing. Somebody else also asked, speaking of digital, wanted to know where that matching game came from. That's on a site called classtools.net. If you've never been there, it has a lot of really, really neat activities that you can download for free or use for free online that you don't need to use in a breakout game. But certainly if you're looking for a digital breakout, clues or puzzles, or you want to incorporate like one of those kinds of things into a physical breakout, that's a really great site to find things that use Pac-Man games on there, like the concentration game. There's Facebook templates, Twitter templates that you could kind of all weave into, you know, those activities, or use them as a standalone for something else in your classroom. You could certainly do that.
And just really quick about her planning game, when she brought it over, one of the numbers, and my kids played it just to make sure they had some experience. There's a pair of sunglasses on the table. When you put the sunglasses on and they look at the light, there's a fortune code. So it can be simple as that. And then one of the things that my kids thought was super cool was it was a word search. And when they filled in the word search and they did it correctly, it revealed a 3-digit code. So they could be pretty simple, you know.
Pencil paper.
Yeah. Clues and puzzles, they get them to open the physical locks, but they just thought that those were, you know, I thought that those were pretty cool.
Yeah, and actually the sunglasses clue was a 5th grader that's now a 6th grader said, you know, do you have a pair of sunglasses that we can write on? Because if we put numbers and hold it up, you can see, you know, so that's a pretty simple clue, but, you know, it's not something that you automatically would do with a pair of sunglasses. They put them on and they walk around, and then all of a sudden someone will look up and go, whoa, there are numbers on here. And then that kind of initiates, you know, the beginning of the game. So again, I know I keep saying this, but it's like thinking outside of the box a lot for when you're creating and when you're playing. And this is, I promised my 8th grade students that I would show this, so just in case you ever talk to any of them. They built a game for Day of the Dead, and so the object was like this eye doctor is missing with his daughter, and you have to go through time and get them and bring them back so that they can participate in this family event or whatever. They were ingenious with some of the things. Now these kids have been building games for 4 years. They They had motion sensors. When you open things up, things screamed, jumped out. They had spring-loaded objects that I got for them, that when you would open up certain cans or certain boxes, like spiders would come flying out or snakes would come. You know those like Pringle can kind of thing, then you can shove some plastic thing, you take the lid off and it kind of opens up. Like they had all kinds of things built into the side of that they glued into things. So they really become pretty skilled at thinking of really neat ways to build puzzles. That's the experience that I have had. And then, so when people say, like my superintendent will say to me all the time, like, why do you do that? And not just with this activity, but just anything. He's kind of like, why are you doing that kind of guy? And not because he's critical, but because he wants to know what our why is. And so my why is, if you have a portrait of a graduate, which we've developed that in our district, like we have developed a vision for when students graduate from our school district, what kind of a skill set do we want them to have? And we want them to have those essential skills that will help them be successful in the workforce or college or career, you know, whatever it might be when they leave, you know, our four walls. And so for me, what I do with these games, which is just one aspect of what my job is, I feel that those kinds of skills help develop our portrait of a graduate and prepare kids for work and whatever they're going to do outside of us. And so last thing that I quickly want to do with you, and then I want to show you on the website where you can find things, is talk a little bit about that Xscape extravaganza just again. So if you're interested in that, I know we're running out of time, please see one of us before you go. You have my contact information. There are some handouts up here about Xscape EDU, and they coincide with some of the slides. There's some EdCorps brochures up here if you're interested in learning anything more about that, and then I have some sticker swag that you're welcome to help yourself to. Last but not least, I have a form. If you would like to be on our mailing list, I will certainly add your name. And I'm not kidding when I say, you know, that I pretty much have permission from my superintendent to travel, you know, wherever. We went on January 6th, an hour and 15 minutes away, and did a presentation for students and a couple of STEM teachers, and they are now bringing 2 groups of students to our event on March 20th. So we're trying collectively, you know, to spread the word and get as many people involved, but even if you don't think that you can be involved in our movement or in our event, I certainly hope that with whatever you have learned today, you could take whatever that is away and roll that out into your classroom, because I'm telling you that it is time consuming, but you can get a lot of bang for your buck with working with kids in this capacity. So just quickly, I want to show you the website that we have.
There's a QR code on it.
And there's a QR code. Yes, if you didn't get that at the beginning, I'll put that back up. Is that my time?
Yeah.
Okay. So on this website, you can see all of the teams that participated in last year's extravaganza. You can see pictures of what games that they built and an explanation of what it was that they built and what was the task that students were, or that players of the game were charged with. There's also a really neat video that Kermit created from the images that he took that day. It gives you an in-depth look at what that looked like last year. And then I just have a section in here, a sneak peek into the 2020 event. So you can see here Sarah's game right here with her. These are her kids with some other kids. Here's our jail cell that we're building, and we're also building something called Stuck in a Truck. We're simulating a work van, and the rival school students kidnapped kind of our students and put them in the back of this utility van, and their task in the dark is to find the football so that they can get that out to midfield by the time that the game starts. So it's a big rivalry because we have Tyrone. Renee's from Tyrone. I'm from Bellwood. We're big rivals, so they wanted to make kind of this like rivalry thing. So it's really a cool game. But at the bottom of this page, I have all kinds of resources under this DIY, and I just found this one just the other day on Twitter. I followed Kyle Nemus. He's somebody new that I found, and he's into digital breakout games. So if you click on this link, he has an entire Google Doc that has tons of resources on it, similar to like that classtools.net. So that is a really great resource. But all of the, so the one that made those QR codes, it's on here somewhere. I'll just tell you though, I can't find it right now. But
QR codes for coloring.
it's QR codes for coloring, is it on? It's on there. I will tell you this though, if you want to use that, kids love that one. It's in German, the site. So if you pull that up and see that it's all like in a different language, don't panic. You just go to the upper right-hand corner and drop down the menu and pick English, and then you can, unless you can speak German, then you're good. But that's a really, oh, here it is. It's right here. But that's a really good one as well. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of pictures, a lot of videos. There's a video even of the Day of the Dead game that shows you all the different contraptions that the students built. So if you have any questions, we're up here for a few minutes, and thank you so much for coming, and go breakout, Warriors, Xscape EDU Warriors, right?